welcoming Anjana ma'am and Shankar sir to this auspicious venue of Kerala Literature Festival 7th edition.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, and it's a pleasure to have you, Mr. Aiyar. Welcome all of you for braving the heat and being here to listen to one of the very important voices in the political landscape of India. Mr. Aiyar is known as a man who speaks his mind, his heart, and when he does it quite bluntly. So when he writes a book, especially about Rajiv Gandhi, former Prime Minister of India, and also a period in the Indian political landscape, which is very defining, whether it is politically or socio-economically. I'm sure you don't expect any less candor from you, sir. And, I just want to start by asking you, when you came up with your first book, and you had a session yesterday on the memoirs of a maverick. So after you wrote that book, where, you take us a little closer to your life, career, the corridors of power that you have walked through, and the things that you have seen up close. Why did you decide to come up with a book which is exclusively documenting Rajiv Gandhi and his times? And how did this book come about?
You see, as I explained yesterday, I had been asked in 2015 to write my autobiography. And I said to myself that since I do not matter, since I've achieved nothing, since there is nothing that history would remember about me, what is the point of writing an autobiography except for the fact that for 6 years, Rajiv walked in the shadow of death and I walked in his shadow. So the defining moment of my life was my relationship with Rajiv Gandhi. So I assumed that what I had to say about the Prime Minister with whom I worked, with the leader of the opposition with whom I worked, would be what would carry the autobiography. But after I had spent nearly 200 pages writing about Rajiv Gandhi, the publisher said to me that this is not autobiography, this is political biography, and it does not gel with your autobiography. So she just wanted to cut out 200 pages of Rajiv Gandhi and said, you confine it to 20 pages. And I thought that would be a travesty. So it took about 1 year for me to convince the publisher that if you're not going to publish it as part of my autobiography, then at least publish these 200 pages separately. Fortunately, after nearly 11 months of argument, I prevailed, and she had the joy of cutting these 200 pages out of my autobiography, and I had the joy of seeing them published separately. So it is because the political biography is in a different mode of writing to my own memoirs. It has come out as a second book, but was actually written as an integral part of the first book. Indeed, the second volume of my memoirs, which is after my first 50 years, was all part of one solid manuscript. And my publisher just threw up her hands at the 500,000 words I'd written. And she said, I asked you to write an autobiography and you produced War and Peace. So we ended up eventually having to cut the manuscript that was already ready as one integrated whole into 3 different publications being published sequentially and not simultaneously. So the Memoirs of a Maverick came out in August, at the end of August 2023. And then this second volume, which was always ready, has been published as a separate volume at the beginning of this year. In fact, its formal launch is not till the 19th of January. And I've already been asked to submit the manuscript of the third volume, which I expect will be cleared by the publisher in about 6 months' time. So that'll complete the trilogy.
Yeah. And that's the book that we have here, the Rajiv I Knew. You can pick up the copies in the bookstores. And also it's a matter of pleasure for KLF that this is the first time ever this book is being discussed and dissected
That's right.
at a public event.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Mr. Aiyar, so on that note, you spoke about your relationship with Rajiv Gandhi. So, before we delve into the pages and the events, that made or broke Rajiv Gandhi, the trials and tribulations he went through as a young prime minister, can you just, for the benefit of our audience, just say on the outset, what was your relationship with Rajiv Gandhi was like? Because in your book, you've said, I think throughout the book, you have this disclaimer. You are a close friend, but not a political advisor. You are a good friend, but not a confidant of Rajiv Gandhi. You are a participant, a part observer. So tell us, what was it that shaped your relationship with Rajiv Gandhi?
It was a relationship between a joint secretary and his prime minister. I wouldn't even describe it as a friend, although after he's died and I'm continuing to fly the Rajiv flag, perhaps he would now accept that I am a friend. But at that time, it was the relationship purely between a civil servant doing his job and the Prime Minister of India telling him what that job was. I had been at school with Rajiv, but I was 3 years senior to him. And in a school in which you're there for 5 years, 3 years is such a huge gap that I didn't know him, but of course he knew me. You always know your seniors. And then we were at Cambridge together. We overlapped for a year. But he belonged to the rich set, and I belonged to the penurious set. So there was, while he was taking Sonia Gandhi to the best restaurants, I was looking for girlfriends who would cook for me. This was the difference between us. We belonged to completely different social, economic, political, cultural, and even intellectual levels. I hardly knew him, and certainly I never expected him, and he didn't expect himself to ever become a politician. He was keen on his aeronautics. He was a very good airlines pilot, and that's what he wanted to be for the rest of his life. And if his brother had not died, there is no way in which he would have entered politics. So therefore, he was non-political. I was a civil servant. There was no way the twain could meet. But then came Operation Blue Star. And when Operation Blue Star took place, I was given the special responsibility of informing the Sikh diaspora all over the world that whereas the Akal Takht had been totally destroyed by the Indian army, they had been given strict orders to not shoot at the Harmandir Sahib. And the Harmandir Sahib is the sacred place. The Akal Takht is really just an administrative building. So I took it upon myself to let the Sikh diaspora know that whatever they thought of Operation Blue Star, the intention of the government of India as conveyed to the Indian army, which obeyed these orders in a very, very faithful manner, was that the Harmandir Sahib, the sacred golden temple, should not be attacked, despite whatever barrage of artillery was coming from the Akal Takht and other parts of the golden temple. And I didn't know that Mrs. Gandhi had given the responsibility for external publicity to her eldest son. So I had to prepare a daily report for my foreign secretary, which I was asked to copy to a joint secretary in the External Affairs Ministry. And Rajiv kept reading those. And he didn't know, of course, that fate had decided that his mother would be assassinated. So he suddenly became prime minister at the age of 40 without even wanting to do it. And because of my reports on what I had done with regard to publicizing at least one little truth about about Operation Blue Star to our Sikh diaspora, he decided that he wanted me in his office. And although it was a rather long-winded process, at the end of it, I found myself as joint secretary to the Prime Minister, a Prime Minister I didn't know personally and who didn't know me personally. But while we worked together, I found that his general open-mindedness, his general worldview, his desires for what India should achieve were exactly the same as mine. So there was a meeting of minds, and it is this marriage of minds that has found expression in what is now going to be regarded as the companion volume to my memoirs.
Yeah, that's very interesting to know that you say, it has nothing to do with your Doon school days or, your time in Cambridge together. But when Rajiv Gandhi was anointed as the Prime Minister after his mother was assassinated, he was just catapulted, as you said, into the political landscape. There was this criticism of the Prime Minister that the PMO is more like a Doon school mafia club. He has handpicked boys from his school days. And was that a very intentional move from his side where he wanted to dispel off his mother's influence and to stand on his own, where he needed his men and he chose bureaucrats, technocrats, people like you, Sam Petroda?
This was the first of many media lies that completely wrecked his political career. Nobody cared to check who were the people in PMO. They just took the fact that Arun Singh, who was the parliamentary secretary, was a Doon school boy and a Doon school friend. They didn't check whether Sarla Grewal, the principal secretary, was a Doon school boy. She couldn't be a Doon school boy because she was a girl. He was the head of the office. P.C. Alexander of Kochi, he was earlier his personal private secretary, his principal secretary, and he was not remotely connected to Doon School. Gopi Arora was his great political counselor, and he was not at all connected to Doon School. He had inherited Wajahat Habibullah, who was a Doon School boy, but he left within a year and a half. And since Arun Singh was dropped from the PMO within 9 months of Rajiv becoming PM, I was the only Doon School boy there. And I didn't know Rajiv Gandhi at school. So this was a total lie, but it was the first of about 1,000 lies that the media span about him. I am very fond of you, but I don't like your profession. I find that the media is interested in stories, it's not interested in the truth. And when it finds the truth staring it in the face, it just runs away. Because the truth is boring, whereas lies are fascinating. So it's a profession that I do not have any respect for, although I really love you. I think you're a very nice girl.
Thank you. Yeah, so, but it's very interesting, a little bit of, we are getting away from the book, but since you made that remark, it's very interesting that, this targeting of the media is a art that your rival, Prime Minister Modi and his government has been perfecting, as an art. And, you are saying that the media was very critical and they were very, spreading lies with press. So is it the same? What is the difference whether it is a Congress government or a BJP government, when there is any critical voices coming from the media, why are you so perturbed about that?
Not at all. In Rajiv Gandhi's time, the press was completely free. The press was completely free to tell the truth if it knew how to spell that word, and it was completely free to tell its lies if that was what it wanted. Now, as this book demonstrates, and we'll go into it, I'm sure, in detail, almost every charge made against Rajiv Gandhi was without any basis in truth. And I see that we have a number of Swedes in the audience, so I will say straight away that the Bofors story was a complete lie from beginning to end. And it ended with the High Court of India stating that there was not a scintilla of evidence, I'm quoting the words, not a scintilla of evidence that Rajiv Gandhi or anyone associated with him had taken even 1 krona. And yet, the Swedish investigating police had a head who was leaking documents to an Indian journalist based in Geneva, and she was sending these 300 documents to her editor, who was picking up the documents and quoting them, but was unable to tie one end with the other. And it was only when all the documents came in, from Sweden, from Switzerland, from wherever else that it needed to be brought in, and was given to the CBI, that the CBI could not find in all this documentation a scintilla of evidence. And yet, merely because a Swedish official was untrue to his word was taken as the truth by the newspapers. And these sheafs of documents were published one after the other, and they kept asking, why aren't you following this? In fact, immediately after the story broke, Rajiv Gandhi decided that it was only the Swedes who could find the truth. So he formally asked the Swedes to investigate the matter and tell him what had happened. And the Swedes were unable to investigate the matter fully because there are commercial secrecy laws in Sweden which the Swedes insisted had to be obeyed. So if they had to be obeyed, they could confirm that there was a bank payment made by Nobel Industries to somebody or the other in Switzerland, but they couldn't explain what was the reason for that amount and what was the amount and why it was being paid. So the irresponsibility of the media was not in collecting documents that were being shown to them in very, very large numbers, in huge numbers, in hundreds. And at the end of the story, in 2015, the identity of this head of police, who in Chitra Subramaniam's dispatches was described as Sting, turned out to be a man called Lindström. And Lindström confesses in that interview in 2015 that they had nothing that led to the assumption that Rajiv Gandhi took any money on Bofors. And yet, this one story completely destroyed the political career of a man who had the highest vision for India. That is why today I am so angry about the media.
Get it? In your book, you have dedicated a section on the controversies that Rajiv Gandhi went through, and Bofors you have mentioned in detail. You've dedicated reams of pages to give readers the other side of the Bofors story. I'm sure you will pick it up and read on a story which was described as a milestone in Indian journalism's investigations. But still there's a lot of mystery surrounding the case. People still feel there is no closure. And even, in the political campaigns, Mr. Modi was attacking a prime minister who was long dead about the Bofors scandal. But let's move on to the second huge controversy where the ramifications of it, we still see it, we'll still feel it, which is the Shabano's case and how Rajiv Gandhi overturned the Supreme Court decision. So you have again spoken about what exactly Rajiv wanted to do when he overturned the decision and he passed that act to support divorced women. So could you please explain to us, most of us who grew up reading about the controversy believe that he reversed the Supreme Court judgment. But you are arguing in the book that Rajiv Gandhi essentially did not reverse the decision, but he in fact got it into the civil legal code. So could you please give us some insight into how did you see that and why I think initially you say you were taken by surprise when Rajiv Gandhi didn't close the case with the Supreme Court judgment.
Well, it begins really with Jawaharlal Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi, who underlined unity in diversity, as I said yesterday, as the fundamental principle of India's nationhood. That if we attempted uniformity in India, we would lose our unity because we are such a diverse people with so many different languages, so many different religions, so many different political opinions, that if you try and impose uniformity, it will not lead to unity. But if you allow diversity, then people will agree to belong because they can have two characteristics, one as whatever language group or religion group they belong to, and second, as Indians. In fact, what I would say is that if I'm not allowed to be a Tamil, I can't be an Indian. But if I'm allowed to be a Tamil, then I can easily be an Indian. In the same way, the Muslim community was told that they need not fear that their personal law will be interfered with. Because after all, it is personal law that identifies a person as belonging to one community or belonging to another. For instance, take the marriage vows. As a Hindu, you would go 7 times around the fire in order to establish that you are going to marry so and so. Among the Muslims, the husband and wife or the bride and bridegroom are not even seated together at the wedding. They are seated separately, and what the Qazi does, that is the intermediate priest, the Qazi is the juridical authority in Islam. He works out a document which is a document on what will happen if this marriage fails. Now, can you imagine a Hindu ceremony where you begin by saying the marriage will fail? I mean, my mother would throw everybody out of the
We have the prenuptials.
But the Nikah Nama, which is the juridical document, begins with the two families deciding what will be the dower that the bride will bring, and in the event of the marriage breaking up, how will the dower be returned, and what will be the terms of the settlement of the divorce. This, the Qazi then takes it to the bride and reads it out to her, and the only role that she really plays is to say Kabul hai, which means I accept this. Then the Qazi goes elsewhere where the bridegroom is sitting and reads out the terms of the Nikah Nama, which really are not the terms of the marriage, but the terms of the divorce. And he then says, Kabul hai, which means I accept, and thus is the marriage solemnized. So there is no way in which a non-Muslim marriage ceremony can be made to substitute for what is a marriage ceremony of a religion and a jurisprudence connected to that religion, which has lasted for over 1,000 years. Omar Khayyam, which I'm sure you read as a schoolgirl, he talks about the 7 and 20 jarring sects refute. So I wondered what the 72 jarring sects were. It turned out that there were 72 schools of jurisprudence in Islam, and that all these 72 schools were contending with each other as to which was telling the truth. And that is why Edmund Burke, in his impeachment of Warren Hastings, refers to Mohammedan law as the oldest and most thought through body of jurisprudence that exists for humankind. He said this in the 19th century. Now, if this is so about Islam, surely we should not be regarding Islam's way of life, particularly in respect to marriage, as some kind of barbaric holdover from the Arabian desert of the 7th century. Yet in the mind of Mr. Chandrachud, who the father of the present Chief Justice, who was then that, this was the case. And there was no examination of what does Muslim marriage law state with regard to women who are divorced. Well, what Rajiv Gandhi's investigations showed, and he had no idea what Muslim personal law was, but he spent 8 or 9 months closing his ears to prejudice and saying, let me understand what is Islamic law on the subject of a divorced woman. Firstly, it said that irrespective of whether a woman is indigent or not indigent, she is entitled to go back to her family, to be looked after by the males of her family. And if the males of the family do not look after her or cannot look after her or are dead or whatever the reason, then it becomes the job of the Waqf board to provide maintenance for the divorced woman until she gets remarried. And the fascinating thing about Muslims is that one survey showed that 78% of divorced Muslim women are remarried within 2 years. There's no social stigma that applies to remarriage. So it's not a lifetime question for most. It's a question of what you do over the next 2 or 3 years. Now, it also said, Muslim law, that the divorcing couple cannot have any marital relations for a period of 3 months, which is called the iddat period. And in that iddat period has to be made the settlement, which will lead to the final
Iddat.
divorce. Now, what the qazis were doing were interpreting the Muslim law to mean maintenance for 3 months. What Rajiv Gandhi did was to say, no, it's maintenance for a lifetime. But it has to be paid within the period of iddat. And what he did was, he converted this very humane Muslim law into the civil law of India by saying that if the Waqf board does not look after the divorced woman, then the magistrate's court will pass an order ordering the Waqf board to pay the maintenance. And if the Waqf board then doesn't pay the maintenance, the qazi can be arrested. The head of the institution can be arrested. So he ensured that a lacuna, which is the qazi determining whether the payment has been made or not, will now be determined by the civil courts of India. And in 2001, the challenge that was mounted by Daniel Latifi to the Rajiv Gandhi innovation of the Muslim Women Rights on Divorce Bill Act, it was said by the same Supreme Court that gave the 1985 judgment. That Supreme Court in 2001 stated that this was a brilliant piece of legal legerdemain, and that the rights of Muslim women had been so guaranteed by this act that there was no need to check on what the Muslim law said. The Indian law said that a Muslim woman, if she's being divorced, will within the 3-month iddat period receive whatever maintenance is required from her husband for the rest of her life, in addition to the dower. And for the last 25 years, this has been the law of the land. And all Muslim divorce cases have been decided on this basis. And yet, amazingly, I give the example of Neerja Chowdhury, who's a friend I've had since she was 9 years old. So I'm not criticizing her, I'm criticizing the book. She's written a book called How Prime Ministers Decide. She has a chapter on Rajiv Gandhi in which she flays him for what you call reversing the 1985 Supreme Court law, and does not even mention the Supreme Court judgment of 2001. And here's a top-class reporter, one of the highlights of our media, a girl I've known since the age of 12. In fact, I taught her Pythagoras' theorem. She's a brilliant girl. But the prejudice is so strong that you look only at the 1985 judgment and you ignore the 2001 judgment, although it's been on our statute books for 25 years. So therefore, I think the media is responsible for spreading this canard that Rajiv Gandhi was anti-feminist. If he was, will you please explain to me why the same Rajiv Gandhi reserved 1/3 of the seats in our panchayats for women, which has now gone up to 50%. There are 14 lakh elected women in our panchayats entirely because of Rajiv Gandhi's initiative. There are more elected women in India today than in the rest of the world put together. And this calculation was made for me by the Queen of Norway. And so the fact of the matter is that he was pro-women. He was at the same time obliged to maintain our unity in diversity through allowing Muslim personal law to operate. At the same time, the humane angle, which the law did not adequately cover, was covered by him. It is in fact shocking that that Justice Chandrachud Senior did not increase the compensation to be given to Shah Bano beyond the High Court judgment of 179 rupees and 20 paise. That was all that was awarded to her. And it was always put by the husband into the court. And she
Which she
died
never collected
without
it.
taking one penny of it. So she was clearly not indigent. And yet the vagrancy provisions were taken up by the Supreme Court. So it was a complete miscarriage of justice. And what Rajiv did was that whatever the cost to him, and the cost was very high, because he said to me, and that has been repeated, attributed to Tripathi in Nirja's book, that Sonia Gandhi was telling him, don't do it. And he felt that as the Prime Minister of India, although he was very deferential to Sonia, as the Prime Minister of India, he owed it to the Muslim community to tell them that we respect your way of life, we don't want to oppose it, but there seems to be this lacuna that the Qazi is deciding, and since all Qazis are paternalistic, they've been deciding this against the women's interest, so I'm going to introduce the magistrate. Now this was a brilliant move. It was a totally humane move. It was a move entirely in the interests of Muslim women. And yet, even today, there is the hint in your question that it was anti-feminine, anti-Muslim, anti-Muslim woman. Rajiv said to me that the opposition tells me that no woman, either Muslim or non-Muslim, is going to vote for me because I did this. And he says, as far as men are concerned, the entire left and the liberal intelligentsia are not going to vote for me because of this. So what does it leave me with? It leaves me with a handful of Muslim clerics. So whom, and I quoted this, so whom am I supposed to be appeasing? He was working towards the unity of India and not looking at his electoral prospects. And yet there are stupid journalists till today, and I call them stupid very deliberately, who say, he opened the locks to please the Hindus, and he did this Sabano reversal in order to please the Muslims. It's just not true. He had a majority of 404 seats in parliament, about 100 more than Modi has today. And he didn't need to appease anybody to continue in power. He did the right thing. And it is because the right thing is being confirmed by the Supreme Court of India that I believe it is my duty to, as somebody associated with him, to bring the truth onto the table and not allow these journalistic lies and prejudices to go on dominating public thinking on the subject.
Mr. Aiyar, I really believe that your media bashing calls for another book altogether. I hope we can expect one on that. But all said and done, you're trying to pin the whole blame on the media, but in your own book, you have said, you called it a nefarious alliance between the secular forces and the communalists. They came together. So it was not just the media, it was not just the people who said this was Muslim appeasement or it was anti-feminist. And you also said this is one fundamental reason which led to the resurrection of BJP, and we have what we have now.
Well, you see, there was a fundamental change in the way in which the media operated in the late 1970s and in the 80s. That is the period immediately after the emergency when the Janta government came in. And the leader of that movement in the media was my classmate, Arun Shourie. He produced an article called what did he call it? Something, Politics as Commerce or something. And he flayed Antule, Abdur Rahman Antule, who was the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, pointing to the link between the donations being made to the Indira Gandhi Pratishthan and the licenses being offered there. Now this case went before the Supreme Court and they said no link had been established. But it started a trend, a new trend in Indian journalism, which came to be called investigative journalism. Now investigative journalism has a very important role if it is designed to tell the truth which is being hidden. But it's not a desirable thing if all it's interested in is sensationalism. And unfortunately, the Arun Shourie type of investigative journalism was more concerned with sensationalism, selling newspapers, getting ads, and making the owners very rich than it was with finding the truth or trying to explain that this is one angle and that is one angle. Now, in this atmosphere, the left and the liberals joined hands with the BJP. Now, remember that the BJP had been reduced to exactly 2 seats in 1984. And then it rose to 88 by the next election. And that was brought about by this nefarious combination between VP Singh on the one hand, the BJP on the other, and the left on the left. I mean, all three of them got together just to do down this one man. And the big case they had picked up was Bofors. And at every election meeting, VP Singh would pull a piece of paper out of his pocket and say that on this is written the bank note, the number of the Swiss bank in which Rajiv Gandhi has hidden his wealth. And within 15 days, or sometimes within 1 month, I'll put him in jail. Well, he never got him in jail. And he was completely exonerated by the judicial process. So we have come to today's pass largely because the left and the liberals vacated the space that they should have been taking on their own. If the left and the liberals had on their own said that we object to Rajiv Gandhi, that would have been decent, principled politics. But when they joined hands with the BJP and they brought the VP Singh government into existence, that was the day that Modi was really born. And the consequence of that is that we have today, or have had for 10 years, a government that is dedicated to everything that is opposed to the India that became independent in 1947. And in this coming year, within the next few months, India will have to decide, the people of Bharat will have to decide whether they want to continue with this minority government that has a two-third majority in parliament, or whether the majority of Indian opinion, which is scattered among different parties, will come together to bring India back onto the Gandhi-Nehru path, which was the path on which we embarked in 1947.
Staya, good that you referred to the coming elections, and I think a lot is going to hinge on the Ayodhya temple inauguration. We see the kind of fanfare and the media, as you said, drum beating to that. But one of the critical decisions taken by Rajiv Gandhi, which you have completely, given him a clean chit, saying that Rajiv Gandhi did not know, but his critics still pin that responsibility on him and his government for opening and unlocking the doors of Babri Masjid. And decades after, it has taken a life of its own.
There is no doubt at all that constructive responsibility for whatever happened in January, February of 1986 devolves upon the whole of the government, including the Prime Minister, or I should say, including particularly the Prime Minister. And he paid the price for it. But there are still facts on the ground. And I brought those out, that this was a conspiracy hatched by Arun Nehru, who had the kind of dirty political mind that wanted to divide the people of India into different communities and appease each one of them. Rajiv was of a totally different view. That is why Arun Nehru did not inform him in advance. And it was all fixed, completely fixed, because the court called in the SP and the district magistrate. The SP said, without the locks, I can maintain law and order. The district magistrate said, without the locks, I can maintain law and order. He also said that there is no judicial order that the locks cannot be opened. So the district judge, the district sessions judge, he announced at about 5:30 in the evening that the locks may be opened. Within 10 minutes, the locks were opened in Ayodhya, which is not in Faizabad. It's several kilometers away. And the minute it was opened and the crowd surged in, then you had the beginnings of what we are seeing today. But you are completely wrong in thinking that because Mr. Modi is going to be present in Ayodhya and consecrate the image, the idol of Ram Lalla with his own beautiful personal hands. The fact is that the four Shankaracharyas of India have said that this is sacrilege and have refused to attend the function. So the real Hindu is now beginning to show up. Now we know the difference between Hinduism and Hindutva. Hinduism is a religion. It is the most ancient and the most practiced religion in India. But Hindutva is a political philosophy. It deals with Hindu majoritarianism. And most Hindus, at least 50% of Hindus, have never voted for Hindutva. It is it's our way of conducting elections that has resulted in Hindutva power for the last 10 years. So now that Mr. Modi's attempt at being personally present and personally conducting the religious ceremonies has received such strong disapproval from the four accepted seers of the Hindu religion, who constitute what you may call the pontiffs of the Hindu religion. I think it's all going to turn back on him. It'll bite back, and I am not ready to write off the elections as some people would like to do today before the first vote is cast.
I love your optimism. I'm sure so many people who are against this, saffron takeover of India is pinning their hopes. So before we open the floor for questions, I think we have 3 more minutes. It'll be unfair to let you go without asking you a question about Rahul Gandhi, because for a lot of people who still believe in the secular, Nehruvian secular India, there is some sense of hope from Rajiv's son. I know you haven't worked closely with him like the way you have with Rajiv, but do you see any throwback to his father? How do you evaluate him as a potential prime minister or even a leader who can take on the Modi juggernaut?
Well, when I first met Rahul, he was 13 or 14 years old. So you don't expect political opinions of high wisdom to come out of the mouth of a teenager. After that, after his father's assassination, he went away from India for the better part of 10 or 12 years. On his return, he was elected to Parliament in 2004, along with me. I was elected earlier also, but in 2004 I was elected and made a minister. And that is when I saw a little bit of him. But after he became the vice president of the Congress party in 2013, I have been marginalized in the Congress party. So I've just had no opportunity of seeing Rahul Gandhi at work. I have met him once or twice. I think in the last 10 years, I have perhaps had one long session with him of a couple of hours. But the rest of the time, I'm not given appointments. I've never met him. I don't see him. Sonia Gandhi doesn't meet me. I'm not in any committee of the Congress. I haven't been asked for the last 4 or 5 elections to campaign for the party. So since I'm so utterly isolated from the Congress party, and I'm only committed to Nehruvian socialism, which I saw manifest in Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi, who dominated my adult life, I think it would be very unfair for me to make any definitive judgment about this young man. I don't know him, he doesn't know me. He's very courteous, he smiles. He has insisted that I should call him Rahul. He insists on calling me Mani, although the difference in our age is that I'm just about double his age. So for somebody who's operating well beyond my vision, I'm not able to make a meaningful comment about him. And to make a non-meaningful comment might perhaps give you your headline, but is not going to be satisfactory for me.
Okay, thank you so much. And you have made a very honest attempt, and we see Rajiv Gandhi shining through this book. And you keep saying, whether it is through the book or any public platform that you have, that a man of impeccable integrity and goodness, and you bat for him. for me, the takeaway from the book was it is very ironic that maybe two crucial decisions taken by Rajiv Gandhi or indirectly during his tenure, whether it is the Shabano case or the opening of the Ram Mandir, that gave muscle to the Hindutva politics and it brought Hindutva politics to the mainstream. So can you deny that?
I deny that Rajiv's intention was to give the BJP a platform. That was because of Arun Nehru's indiscipline. So how can you attribute a motive to Rajiv Gandhi that Rajiv did not have? And he fought back against it. As is explained in this book at very considerable length, after his defeat in the 1989 election, Rajiv Gandhi put together a cabal of legal advisors headed by Siddharth Shankar Ray, and they came to the conclusion that the key issue with regard to the Babri Masjid was there a temple at the site in 1528 when Mir Baki built the Babri Masjid? Did he destroy a temple to make a masjid? And archaeologists, historians could easily give the answer to that question. So under Article 142 of the Constitution, easily a case could be filed in the Supreme Court directly by the Government of India and asked to pronounce judgment on the one single relevant question, which is, was there an extant temple at the Ram Janmabhoomi, which was destroyed by Babur's general Mir Baki in 1528 to make way for a masjid? That was the simple answer, yes or no. And on that basis, policy could be decided. But when this proposal was taken to Chandrasekhar, who was then the temporary Prime Minister of India, we didn't know how temporary, but he was the Prime Minister of India, he refused to move under Article 142 and instead moved under Article 143, which was a non-binding opinion tendered by the Supreme Court for the personal knowledge of the President of India. And then Rajiv was killed. So who could have told? I don't think L.K. Advani knew on the day the locks were opened that his career, which had ended, was going to be restarted by him. So what happened was that there was a spark which was turned into a fire with his chariots of fire. And instead of being horrified at a Rath Yatra starting out in Somnath and continuing all the way up to Ayodhya, where thousands of people got killed, largely of the minority, that this would be accepted by the Hindu community. After all, after partition, Nehru brought in secularism in India. The horrors of partition were much worse than anything that has been experienced at or connected with the Babri Masjid. And the Indians, who were still 85% Hindu in 1947, accepted this secularism because that is part and parcel of the Hindu religion and the Hindu way of life. But these fascists have perverted the Hindu religion into being anti-Muslim. Now, it's pointed out in an article that I've read only today that after all, Acharya Tulsidas lived at the same time as the so-called Babri Masjid was built. He lived at the same time. He wrote the Tulsi Ramayana. There is no reference in any of his writings to a beautiful temple at the Ram Janmabhoomi being destroyed in order to put up a mosque. In fact, attention has been drawn in that article to how many Muslim Nawabs and Muslim Sultans and Muslim kings gave large grants of even up to 500 bighas to enable Hindu temples to be established. The ironic thing is that the Nimal Akhora, which is the headquarters of the Babri Masjid movement or the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, was built on land donated by a Muslim Nizam. So in the 16th and 17th centuries, when the Bhakti movement reached its height, there were Muslims sitting on the throne of Delhi. And they didn't object to Guru Nanak beginning the Sikh religion, or Mirabai, or Kabir, or Tulsi, or Tukaram, or Shankar Dev. The entire bhakti movement, which is what the Hindu religion is largely about today, it's not Vedic so much as bhakti, is unfurled and unfolded itself under Muslim rule. So why do we look upon Muslims as only invaders and destroyers? Have always been part and parcel of us. There's a letter written by Babur, who lived in India only for 4 years, from 1526 to 1530. He died here. He wrote a letter to his son Humayun, in which he says, if you want to preserve this empire, do not interfere with the religion of the people. And that became the philosophy of the Mughal kings until the challenge to the Mughal rule under Aurangzeb, which then gave rise to various myths about Hindu-Muslim battles. But Aurangzeb's chief of army staff was a Hindu called Raja Jaswant Singh. And Shivaji's chief of army staff was a Muslim. So Hindus and Muslims have lived together through this period. And yet the Hindutva people say that it was a period of Hindu oppression. How can the Bhakti movement be reconciled with a period of Hindu oppression? So therefore we have to fight this evil. It was not to create this evil that Rajiv Gandhi went along. He couldn't help but go along because the case had already been, the opening of the locks had already been challenged before the Lucknow bench of the Allahabad High Court, and they were the authority concerned. And then the UP government was impleaded. So there was nothing he could do except find a political solution. And his first attempt at finding a political solution was to send his home minister to locate a plot of land where the Ram Mandir could be built without the masjid being destroyed, and later on, Article 143. And if he had ever become the Prime Minister of India again, then maybe he would have acted under 143. But tragically, he was killed. He was killed on his way to my constituency. So I do feel a very strong sense of guilt that if I had not been there, perhaps he would still be with us. But the fact of the matter is that he was a decent man. And how can I say of a decent, good, compassionate, patriotic Indian who in several of his accords demonstrated that India's national interest was above the party interest, who brought peace to not only Punjab, but also to Assam, also to Mizoram, also to Darjeeling. How can a man like that be described as some kind of a vague Hindu nationalist who was trying to oppress the Muslims? It's just not true. And his portrayal as a communal, anti-feminine man is such a perversion of the truth that I cannot rest silent except by not allowing sleeping dogs to lie.
Thank you, Mr. Aiyar. On that note, I'm sure you have unlocked a lot of questions in the audience's mind. So let's give them an opportunity to ask a few questions. Please raise your hand and ask question. Yeah, mic is there.
Well, thank you, sir. First of all, your conversation with this lady is absolutely fine and excellent and elaborative and very informative. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
And I just want to have some clarification, say, or rather I'm asking you, some two particular issues which I involve myself to be asked. One is of relating to your association with the previous Rajiv Gandhi government. In the in the formation of the bill, the most remarkable and the most historical one of the local funds bill. I don't know exactly what is the name of the bill exactly, but I feel that you were one of the instrumental persons along with the Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, the then Prime Minister. Then second question that I want to put is very current one. That all the things that you just said about the present scenario or the political scenario that is developing, Absolutely, there is no objection, there is no question of dissent. But still, you are so optimistic. Are you, because of your political affiliation or something like that, I fear? Because the masses, generally the people in India are the gullible people. I use the term the gullible. Those people that who are very easily to be cheated
Sir,
and
can you ask the question, please?
Yeah,
We are really running short on time. Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry. So, the demagogic attempts by the Prime Minister and their all other malice operations.
Yeah. All right, I've got your question.
Yeah, would be so much, what I'm to say, affecting adversely in the next election.
Yeah.
That the democratic.
Yeah, please sit down. You've asked your question. My answer to your first question is that I was not associated at all with the bill relating to Muslim women's rights being protected on divorce. I learnt about it after he died. I researched the whole thing, and this book or the chapter relating to that bill is entirely researched subsequent to the end of my political career. Secondly, yes, it is true I belong to a particular party, even though the party doesn't acknowledge me. I do belong to the party, and I do have very deep Congress convictions. But I am realistic enough to see that even in the last year, that is in 2019, only 37% of the electorate voted for Mr. Modi. Kerala didn't vote for him at all. Tamil Nadu didn't vote for him at all. Telangana didn't vote for him at all. Andhra didn't vote for him at all. Odisha does not vote for him. West Bengal does not vote for him. Punjab doesn't vote for him. Delhi doesn't vote for him. Kashmir doesn't vote for him. So what makes you think that he represents Hindu opinion? He doesn't. He only represents a section of Indian opinion, Hindu opinion, which he has deliberately stoked. And the four seers of the Hindu religion, the four Shankaracharyas, have refused to come to Ayodhya because they do not accept the politicization of their personal religion. So both your questions, I'm afraid, are misplaced. The situation is much happier than you fear.
There's a question coming from there.
Thank you. I have the mic. What I want to say is, nobody has spoken about the Rajiv Gandhi Mizoram Accord, which set the stage for so many other accords to bring unity to the country. Could you speak a little about that, sir?
With the greatest of pleasure.
So we have
I'll finish it in 1.5 minutes. I'm sure we can get a few seconds grace time. But I'm so glad the question of Mizoram has been raised. As an army man, General Cardoza knows that the longest insurgency in Indian history began in Mizoram under a man called Laldenga in the famine of 1966. It continued for 20 years up till 1986. In 1986, Rajiv Gandhi made a deal with Laldenga. He said, I will make you the chief minister of your state before even an election is held. And he made his own Congress chief minister, an elected Congress chief minister, the deputy chief minister of Mizoram. So he brought in Laldenga and Zoram Thanga, who is now running the state, who was his deputy. They were all being assisted by the East Pakistan Army. They had their sanctuaries and their supply depots for not only food and clothing and uniforms, but also for arms from the Pakistan Army, which is how they were able to sustain that revolution for 20 years, of which 15 were after General Cardoza had won the Bangladesh War. It carried on even thereafter. So they were being assisted by the new Bangladesh army as well. And Rajiv found a political solution to this. He said that, no, we've used arms, we've used the Air Force, We've tried to bomb these chaps into non-existent, and we've not succeeded. So let's do a deal with them. And the deal was that the leader would become the prime minister, the chief minister. He became the chief minister in 86. In 1987, he lost the government. Not because there was any revolution, but because he lost his majority in the assembly. So elections were declared, and the Congress came into power. And for the last 20 years, ever since 1986, and coming up to today, not 20, but 40 years, the MNF, which is the Mizo National Front of Laldenga, and the Congress Party, particularly under Laltanhola, have been changing places every 10 years. But the most peaceful state in the whole of India is Mizoram. And the most generous Indian state is Mizoram, because all these refugees, the Kuki refugees coming in from Burma, they're all being accepted in Mizoram, but they're being rejected in Manipur. And the result is that we have a totally humane face. And today, there are any number of Mizo officers in the IAS and the IFS and other central services, as also in the Indian Army. So what Rajiv Gandhi did was sacrifice political power in order to unify the nation. And that is the great lesson to be learned from Mizoram. Thank you very much for having asked that question.
Our time is just over. We're like spot on time. So here is a die-hard congressman, a staunch secularist, giving us a book about a prime minister. Though a short tenure, left an indelible mark on our society, polity, and the economy. Please do pick up the book and read. And thank you so much, Mr. Aiyar. It was a pleasure talking to you. And thank you for enlightening us with your detailed take on Rajiv Gandhi and his times and his politics, where you are very much a part of. Pleasure.
Thank you very much, Mani
Thank you very
sir
much.
and Anjana ma'am, for illuminating and rekindling us with the thoughts of Rajiv that Mani sir knew. Thank you very much.